And market. Action.
So, Gerry, when I first met you, had no idea who you were. I was at a business breakfast at a Swan Chamber breakfast quite a few years back, and I remember you specifically, clear as day. You're standing up, and you addressed the crowd, and you were talking about some things, and you looked at the person next to you who happened to be the local mayor, and you berated the local mayor and for his incompetence. And the people in the room chuckled, and I'm going, well, who is this guy? There was something about you that I liked. It was also, who is he, and why was he like that? And I mentioned to my PA, I need to go and meet that guy because he's just unusual. And then from there, I actually meet you, and then here we are, quite a few years later, we've become quite good friends, and this is about the other side to you. It's not the construction boss, Gerry Hanssen. It's not the tough guy. It's why do you do what you do?
Well, it took me a long time, of course, to actually come out of my shell. I remember I was working at Jennings, and I went 4 years to Rostrum.
Right.
And I was always saying things what I thought that people wanted to hear.
Right.
It took me till the age of 60, I was a slow learner, you see, and to actually come out of my shell and say what I felt and what people should be doing.
But surely in the early days, you were, I can't imagine you never giving your opinion, Gerry.
No.
I
was never a very good conformist.
Right.
But because I worked 15 years in a public company, and then I had 10 years in a private company, but with 5 partners, you can't actually be truly yourself because you have to consider the other people.
Right, okay.
And their opinions, and you affect other people. Because in this company, I don't report to anybody by myself or to God.
So you're a committee of one?
I'm a committee of one, exactly. So I can say and do what I feel like. If they want to sue me, that's fine. If they don't like what I say, that's fine. And it took me a long time to discover who I was.
What would you say? I'm sure you've had different turning points in your life. You're not that young, but you appear young in your attitude. What would be, say, a defining moment for you where things changed on the inside?
Well, I've always had this actually. I said this to quite a few people. We grew up in a Catholic village of 1,300 people. And the first religious lesson we had was that if you're a Catholic, you had to go to church on Sunday, otherwise you go to hell. And if you didn't go to confession, you go to hell. Right. And if you ate meat on Friday, you go to hell. And I thought, gee, this is a funny outfit. All you're going to do is finish up in hell.
Yeah.
So that didn't resonate with me at all. So I never, ever complied to church rules because it didn't feel right to me.
Right.
And in fact, it was at that age, actually, in Holland, I detested the weather between October and April every winter.
Right.
I absolutely hated it. So I often call myself a refugee. I escaped the bad weather, even though Holland is economically well off.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be there. And of course, you're not allowed to. I came to Australia as a backpacker at the age of 20. I turned 21 actually 4 days before I arrived in Perth in Fremantle by boat. And you had to be 21 before you're allowed to travel, but you also had to have a building diploma, or you had a diploma of some status before you're allowed to be a backpacker.
Right, okay.
So I finished my school at 19, and I couldn't wait to get out of there, and my dad signed off, and I left.
You weren't worried about travelling by yourself, even those days? Backpacking is pretty familiar today, but those days was different.
Yeah, but I investigated a lot of countries, and I figured Canada was too cold, and America was so. And then South Africa was really my first choice, but I didn't go there because of the apartheid regime. I thought, gee, there's no point in going there because there'll be a bloodbath by the time they finish with that.
Right.
So the next protocol was Perth. And Perth, we've got a dry climate, and it was the most isolated city on earth, which appealed to me as a bit of an adventurer.
Right.
And also it was the early start, of course, of the iron ore boom. So I wanted to be part of new development.
Okay.
And that really enticed me to come to Perth.
Right. Did you ever feel, because you're obviously a natural leader, because I've watched you over the last few years, even at that stage in your early 20s, did you always resonate with leadership?
Well, I guess even on the first job I had actually was a small bridge in Rollestone, and we started in the riverbed with the footings and did the columns, and finished the bridge. We finished the bridge in 7 months and put a handrail on.
Yeah.
And I was the only one allowed to work on Saturday. I got paid overtime on Sundays because they could leave me alone and they could trust me to. I worked for an Italian boss, and lovely guy, and there was a huge amount of trust there. And after 7,
How many guys would you have had?
oh, there was only 5 men on that side.
Five guys, okay. That's still reasonable for a 22-year-old guy.
Yeah, and after that 7 months, I took my savings and I travelled around Australia, backpacked around Australia, hitchhiked for 3-4 months just to confirm that Perth was the place.
Right. So you ended up back.
So I finished back in Perth.
So back to leadership. So here it is. You're 22. From what I've heard before, you've never built a bridge before. You're overseeing building a bridge. You've got 5 guys. Again.
So well, then I wanted to find when I came back, I wanted to find a company which worked in the northwest.
Okay.
It happened to be Jennings built all the houses there.
Jennings
was a national home building company, and they were invited, of course, by Hanssen, which is Rio Tinto now, and BHP to build houses in Newman, Port Hedland, in Dampier, etc. So my English was very poor because I didn't speak any English when I came, and I applied for a job as a labourer on the Curio marshalling yards, and I said, I'll do anything, sweep the floor, etc. I'll prove my point.
Right.
So I started as a labourer, and within a few weeks I finished a particular job, and the foreman said to me, he said, can you fix steel? I'd never fixed a bar in my life.
Right.
I said, yes, I can fix steel. I could read drawings.
Yeah.
Within 3-4 weeks, we didn't lose a concrete pour anymore. And of course, I took the job as a leading hand at the age of 22 of this guy, and the poor old foreman got the sack because he didn't perform. 15 years later, I was construction manager in that company.
Right. And you were, and I can see similarities, obviously, to what you do with your company. So you went right through the ranks in that company.
Absolutely, totally.
Right.
So I left Jennings in 1983 because my first wife then had cancer, and I had to make a lot more money.
How old would you have been then?
I've been there 15 years.
15 years. So you were in, what, 35?
Long service leave, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And I had to make more money, so I joined a friend of mine in the tiling and ceramic tile and the ceiling business. And we worked for Multiplex and Consolidated and all these builders around town. And it's very soon, after 83, in 3 years, I made a lot of money in the union-controlled city.
The union controlled the city?
The union totally controlled the city. And right. I was complying, but I wasn't happy. Even though making a lot of money on those jobs, I wasn't really happy giving in to their demands and their blackmail and extortion.
Right.
Anyway, in 1986, at 40, I became a millionaire. Only a few years later, that the Keating recession we had to have, and people were not paying me. The interest rates went through the roof. So I went from no overdraft in '89 to an overdraft of 1.8 million, and I was at 19%. I owed 860,000.
19%.
Yeah, and I owed $860,000.
Yep.
Builders owed me $860,000 at 180 days. So then the bank, Commonwealth Bank at the time, called the overdraft in because they figured that those people were not going to pay me anywhere. So by the age of 40, I lost a lot.
Right. Back
to zero. The only thing what I had left was the 3 credit cards. So how to start again?
Yeah, but how do you process that? You lose everything, you know,
Yeah, but you see, I only had 20 cents in my pocket when I arrived here.
Right.
So I've never been scared to lose things. I mean,
right.
You know, if you're alive and you got a skill, you only got your skill to sell. So by accident and otherwise, I was doing a tiling job for Transfield at Garden Island, and I had a technical problem, and I asked an engineer, in fact, Ender Vandermeer, who was Vandermeer Engineering, for some advice.
Yeah.
And Ender had played golf with Professor Ian Constable, and it was, he wanted to build a research facility at the Charles Gardner Hospital.
Right.
And he only had $6.5 million in the kitty, and the market for 3 years had been trying, and they all wanted $8.5 million. I said, give me a design and construct and pay everybody weekly, because
Explain design and construct. Just
so design and construct mean that I was in charge of all the detailing,
right,
and how to do the work, and do it as economical as possible.
right. Basically, control everything.
Control everything.
Being a committee of one.
And because Ian was desperate to build his dream
Yeah.
with his charity money from the Lions Club,
Right.
and they believed that I could do this. So halfway through the jobs, the unions wanted to do a deal.
When you say a deal,
A deal meaning a side allowance. They wanted the side allowance.
Right.
But I had made up my mind by that time, after I went broke, no deal is no deal. Because before I went broke, I did a job in Scarborough with, a job with, they're broke now, Consolidated Construction.
Yeah.
I paid $230,000 worth of extortion money, blackmail money, strike pay, you name it.
Right.
You know, Tyler was not allowed to touch a shovel because you paid a double ticket and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So I was over the union, over the CMFU bit.
Yeah.
Didn't want them anymore in my life. So when they wanted to do a deal, I said to Ian, you do a deal, in 30 seconds I'm out of here, halfway through the job.
Right.
So because no deal is no deal, zero. So Ian backed me, and we finished the institute at the $6.5 million budget. And I never looked back. So then a year or so later, I got introduced to a guy named Rick Remington.
Yeah.
He was the director at Finbar.
Yeah.
And they brought a job to me whether I could pass this job. And it'd been out of tender. I didn't know it'd been out of tender. I didn't know the pass. I gave him a pass over the weekend. And I met John Chan, the current managing director or the executive chairman of Finbar.
Yeah.
And he said, you think about this place? Yes, I can do this. And luckily, his partner was Malaysian Nick Den. He had his eyes operated by Ian Constable, so good enough for Ian, good enough for me. So that's how I met
deal.
Finbar.
Yeah, okay.
And the deal, and of course 9 months I delivered on budget.
Yeah.
And that's really when I just came out of my...
How old were you then?
I was just 51.
So by the time you're 51, you almost had a bit of a resolve about where you're going with life.
Oh, no, I was...
Is that right?
my 50th birthday, my speech was that I felt I was just out of nappies. I just discovered...
At your 50th birthday, which is quite encouraging.
Who I was.
Right.
Who I was.
Right.
It took another 10 years for my 60th birthday to actually truly figure out who I was, that I'm not for sale to nobody.
Right.
Only got one boss, that's the creator, that's God. Forget about church.
So let's go back a bit. So you're 22 to 40, you've got this incredible journey of developing your skills, growing in a company, learning some no one can see this though. This is behind the scenes. This is no one knows that. You're actually learning how to manage big jobs, all that stuff. You lose all your money, you're flat broke. You've got to crawl again from 40 to, 47?
47.
40. Go back to that 7 years. I'm sure there's a lot of men and women that have gone through that time in their life that almost feel like I just can't get out of this hole.
You probably have to step back a little bit. The reason I left Jennings as construction manager on a salary was my first wife had cancer.
Right.
And the doctors didn't have a solution.
Right.
So I traveled the world and looked for alternative medicine, alternative doctors, various things.
Right.
And now I cashed in my super, I sold my house, I sold everything. So
to find a cure. To
find a spend on a cure.
Yep.
Because when you got in that scenario, you do everything possible to save your wife. in the end to no avail, but nevertheless, you still had to do it.
Yeah.
So back in '83, when I left, '84, I was back to my last $20,000, and I bought an old house and I renovated that to live. And then I started with my partner, then, was a good friend of mine, in the tiling and the ceilings. And he was turning over $750,000, he was struggling a bit, etc.
Yeah.
So we turned that business, within 2 years, we turned it from $700,000
Yeah.
to $7 million turnover.
Wow. Back then.
Because my skill was recognized by all these builders. And we did tiling on the R&I Tower, Central Park, granite on Quayside on Mill, on you name it. So we're earning lots of money, and it gives you a false sense of security, etc. By 85, 86, I had guys I worked with for many years. They became partners in the company. That was all good and well.
Right.
But little did we realize the '87 stock market crash, things went backwards. Right. Keating was in power. We had the Banana Republic, the recession we had to have. Interest rates went through the roof, and all of a sudden people started to panic, and we were struggling to pay the bill. And I finished up feeling in '89 like a beggar, going to the bank every week.
Right.
Borrow money to pay people's wages because they were not paying me.
Right. Right.
So we suffered that for 3 years till there was nothing left, till I was broke, back to zero. I didn't go bankrupt. The only silver lining I had was I finished up with a $2 million tax loss.
Right.
So there's a silver lining in everything. So from there on, there was a few jobs which I quoted in the previous business, which people like the City of Perth and Trenchville still let me do some work. So I got going, and for 3 years I really paid one credit card off with the other one to pay the wages.
Right.
Till I got
so
back,
how do you
back on my
balance?
feet.
How do you balance? You have a sick wife. You're raising your kids. You got 90% interest rates. You got. How do you personally reconcile that?
Well, you got nowhere to go except for go forward. The beauty is with that is you fight for your wife, you fight for the kids,
Yep.
and you just don't quit, no matter what. How tough it gets, you just survive. As long as you have enough food on the table.
So you even said your skill. You got a company that goes from 700,000 to was it 7 million?
Yeah, 7 million.
So obviously and I've read all your history. I've read every file. I've read every So I remember the history of that company. What skill do you think you had that can accelerate a company? What sort of skill? Not just because of the money, but the ability to create that.
I think it's one of the things I've always had since I was young. I love training people.
Right.
Business is all about renewal.
Right.
And I think if you invest enough in people and in young people and apprentices, it's more of a belief than facts. People say you can't afford to do it, but I say I can't afford not to do it.
So even in that whole process, it was always about training somebody.
Always about training, always.
Right.
And it's always about renewal. If you burn down, it's about renewal.
Let me tell you a story. I met a guy who owns quite a large company, and I can't remember the name of the company, but he's actually doing really well. Quite a wealthy man, and I mentioned that I did a bit of consulting with you, and he almost didn't like you. I would say he actually didn't like you, and I said, well, tell me about him. He said, well, I was an apprentice for Gerry, and I said, well, tell me about your background. And he said the first day I met him, he put me in this room and he says, I want you to tile that wall, which I'd never done before. And then he left me, and then he came back and he looked at what he goes, oh, that's all right, just keep going. And so what I found interesting is that he didn't like you, but you developed this ability to empower people to do things, and yet he still struggled with you. What do you think that is? What do you think that is?
Well, you test people out, their passion. You test Best thing is like drop them off the deep end. See what you
Right.
can do. Show up what you can do.
Right.
Make mistakes and you learn from mistakes.
So you don't mollycoddle people at all?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, because that's, in fact, one of the most difficult apprentices I ever had.
Right.
You probably may know the story, may not. Was I think his name was Roger Twig. I can even remember his name. He had enormous skill, but he was so disruptive with other people. He was almost toxic.
What do you mean disruptive?
Disruptive, just interfere with people and
Right.
and hold them back from work and
Right.
all sorts of things. And I went 3 times to the commission to try to sack him, but I was not allowed to because the unions took me to the commission and they wouldn't let me sack him. I had to train him no matter what. So I put him in this lunchroom, 3 months, and paid his pay for doing nothing because it was cheaper for for him to do nothing than to disrupt the other apprentices.
Right.
So some 20 years later,
Yeah.
he reckons I taught him a big lesson. He's one of the most wealthy subcontractors.
Why? What was the lesson that he learned?
He had to learn to be submissive in the end of the day, but not lose his determination and his skill.
Right.
So you have to ask him why he became successful.
Right.
But the story came back. That was one of the best lessons he learned in life. So there are some cool lessons to be learned. And
So, okay, well, let's talk about training. I obviously, that's a passion of yours. When you, as opposed to training the way you would personally get involved and the training you see today, what do you think, what frustrates you about the training you see today? Because you're clearly frustrated.
well, it's totally compliance orientated. The best example is the unions had a rule that you need 4 tradesmen and 1 apprentice.
Right.
And the poor old apprentice becomes the slave of 4 tradespeople and gets used up.
Right.
That frustrated me. The best way of training is you have 1 good tradesman,
Yep.
a leading hand preferably, and you got 4 apprentices and you let them do the work. And
Yeah.
you give them the proper instructions and make sure they're safe, make sure they've got the tools, make sure the PPE gear, etc. They become your most productive people in a very short time. Their first year is always difficult, but the second and third year, they go.
Yeah. So you really have an ability to empower young people, and at the same time, for a little season, they don't like you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because it's
Well, the best bosses in my life were the hardest bosses. They were terrible at the time.
Yeah.
But when you grow older, of course, you say, gee, I learned a lot from that. They're the only ones you remember. All the soft ones which let you off the hook, they didn't do you any good. But being fair is the other thing. It's hugely important to be fair to people.
How would you define being fair, though?
Well, fair pay, fair result, fair reward, let people progress from being a apprentice into tradesman, into a leading hand, into a foreman, etc. They need to know there is a future for them.
Right, right.
That's very important, and a lot of people hold people back. They think they're going to have...
Why do you think they hold them back? When you say they hold them back?
Self-interest.
Right.
If you got a subcontractor,
Yeah.
he doesn't want to train the guy so good that he takes his job, whereas I'm not scared. I would hire people who are better than me every day
That's great.
if I could.
Yeah, yeah. So it's almost like the training of today is almost the reverse.
Yeah.
Would you think that it's almost like the reverse?
Well,
What is that?
There's another. I started TAFE, of course, when I was 12 years of age. I had to choose between a theoretical high school or a TAFE. Today, people want to keep people in theoretical high schools up to year 12.
Right.
And fundamentally, that is wrong because 50% of kids approximately want to leave school at year 10 if they could have a chance. It's legal for them to work on the side as an apprentice at 15. So if you let the kids learn with their hands, doesn't mean they're any less.
Correct.
And you empower those, they're your winners long term. If you logically think that a young kid who is not allowed to go and drink and drive, is still at home, at the age of 15 he can earn $12 an hour, times 40 is roughly $500 a week, less a bit of tax maybe. So he can save $400. So if you went to all of the high schools and you did a survey
Yep.
and you explained to young people that if they got a job leaving year 10 as an apprentice,
Yep.
and they would earn $500 a week, and that's the second year they probably earn 700, whatever it is, and then to year 900, whatever it is. The fundamental fact is that 50% of kids, they're tired of listening to the parents and listening to teachers. They're over it. They want to learn to work with their hands.
Right. Right.
When they get that first pay packet, they're off the moon. I've had one of my foremen, he come to me and he says, the wife said to me, I can't handle my 15-year-old. He is absolutely terrible. I can't stand him in the house anymore.
Yeah.
Can we give him a job? He took on, with my electrician, he took an electrical apprenticeship.
Yeah.
When he got his first pay, the mother rang me up and says, I don't know the boy back. He's happy.
You don't know the boy. He doesn't recognise him.
Didn't recognise him anymore. Happy when he come home, happy to go to work, happy he didn't have to go to school anymore, etc.
Yeah.
So, and those stories I've had time and time again.
Right.
So,
So that's again back to it's really incorporated like your personal ability to be continuously successful has always been connected with
young people, and renewal and training.
Yeah,
always.
And redefining that very term of training.
All the time.
Yeah, empowering people.
And listening. If you find a young person with a passion for anything,
yeah,
whether it's a painter or an electrician or plumber,
yeah,
you got yourself a winner. Hardly ever fails.
It's interesting. Even now, we're working with. I can see that you're working with a number of prisoners. What do you find interesting about even that?
Well, of course, a few years ago, you introduced me to Chris Bowen, right? Which is a senior police officer, 15 years in the police force, for his long service leave. And you introduced me, and I said, "What do you do? What do you like to do?" And Chris, the first words were, "I love to unlock kids, not lock them up."
Yeah, I remember him saying that to you.
And I said, the second thing, I asked him, "What is your dream?" And he says, "To have a boot camp." I said, "I'll tell you, I got both. My building sites are a boot camp,
yeah,
and you can unlock the prisoners, bring them to my site, and employ them." The success with these prisoners is quite remarkable because they know where they don't want to be after they come out of prison.
A bit like you with the unions.
Yeah, I know where I don't want to be.
Yeah, that's right.
My whole life, I know where I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going, but I know where I don't want to be. And Chris too, himself, he knows where he doesn't want to be.
Yeah.
Not that the police force was bad, but it wasn't fulfilling his personal needs.
Yeah.
Because he said, every time I picked up a kid, I put him in the paddy wagon, and I had to take him to court and lock him up. I felt bad.
Yeah.
He says, no, unlocking him, go to prison, lock him. And I got successes. It feels good.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
We had on the top out ceremony last week.
Yeah, sorry, what's that?
The top out ceremony for
top out. Oh yeah.
The
Finishing the
building.
construction. Yeah.
So there is what's his name? Ronald.
Winmar?
No, Ronald, I think, an Aboriginal guy.
Yeah, Winmar.
Winmar, is that?
Winmar, yeah.
Anyway, he couldn't stop telling us how much he liked it and his relatives and people. We got now 6 Aboriginal guys, and he inspires the other Aboriginals to become.
No, he's very good. He's related to an old friend of mine.
Scaffolder, you know. And of course, I got my ex-Dutch teacher, who got a scaffolding ticket, and he's the teacher for these guys. So the bonuses you get out of people who like to work and don't want to get into trouble are just immense.
What I like about you, Gerry, since the day I met you, is you don't seem to worry.
Never.
You don't seem to worry.
Well, back in my day when I went broke, I had stomachache for 2 years, and I had an old doctor, and he says, "It's you."
Right.
And I said, "What do you mean it's you?" And he said, "No point in giving you pills." He says, you got to deal with yourself.
Right.
He's a very wise sort of doctor. And it took me a long time. It took me 2 years to wake up that with the unions and that the blackmail and extortion, I let them do it to me.
Yeah.
So it was
Right.
my fault.
So in that 2 years, you're trying to work out, you're trying to centre yourself, whatever the answer is. I remember you telling me about coming out of a courtroom, or there's like a sign that you saw or something.
Yeah, well,
there was a defining moment for you.
In Perth Street, there is a sign on the law courts on the
Yeah.
side.
Yeah,
If you're not prepared to defend your freedom, you don't deserve it.
I love it. I love it. That's so personal, isn't it?
It's absolutely totally personal.
Yeah.
So I wasn't defending my freedom back there. I gave in to all of that blackmail, all the extortion.
Right.
I was feeling sick doing it.
Right. Okay.
So
And then as a result of that, so 2 years, what changed? What was happening? Was it something that you worked out yourself, or?
I think it's well, when I was given in, if there is such thing as a guardian angel,
Right.
I abandoned the guardian angel.
Right.
I had to find him back.
Yeah.
So your spirit, that's why I don't need churches, your spirit is actually the one you have to discover back. What are you made of?
Yeah.
Who are you?
Which is substance.
You know, why do you feel the way you do?
Right.
You got to analyze that.
Yeah.
Some people go down on drugs or they go on alcohol
Yeah.
and they lose that. They want to bury that, but there's no point. You have to face up to it.
Yeah. Right.
And I think I was privileged that one day I woke up and said, enough is enough, no more.
So in order, like any bout, like if you win one, if you've been knocked out, to get back in the ring it might be a little bit frightening. If you've actually been knocked out and you got knocked at a certain point, you think, okay, I need to get back in the ring. And so you obviously face the same or similar challenges. I think you probably face a lot more challenges these days than you've ever had. When I look at the size of your company,
we do, because of the size of the company. But if you're resilient and you stick to your principle and your ethic,
right,
that is the most important thing. You can get through most things.
right,
And you, not. I don't say everybody got that strength, but I'm privileged to be able to do that.
So how would you encourage a young person to develop that?
I think that's why I drop them off the deep end and find out who they are.
Right. Okay. Goes back to that.
And you might find people they're happy to be a carpenter the rest of their life, and that's how they should stay.
Yep.
That's fine.
Help them find their level.
Boxer Brian Dunham, he is 80 years old. He's always been like that. I've worked with him for 44 years. He's always liked his job. He doesn't want to be the boss. He doesn't want to run the site.
Yeah.
He just wants to do his job with efficiency. He's a happy person. He goes home to his family. And
Yeah, but
that is different. We're all born different.
But what I still love about Boxer, 80 years old on your sites, is that the amount of respect he carries on your site the influence he carries is immense. So you're right. It's not about a leadership thing. It's influence.
And it's my job to make sure I got enough work.
Yeah.
To keep him employed, because the saddest day would be that I shut my business up and I go and sell into the horizon and disappear. Well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I would let all these people down. I'll let the apprentices down. And in fact, Finbar are so good in that sense that even John says, I can't let you down, because it'd be a sad day to say to the apprentices, there's no more job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So staying business-wise alive is hugely important.
Let's talk about your philanthropy. And I don't like to use that word loosely, because I don't think philanthropy. I think a lot of people think once I make some money, I want to do these big things. If I had money, where do you think philanthropy starts? How much money do you need to have to be a philanthropist?
I was sponsoring things when I was on credit cards. If I could afford, if somebody asked me for a job, I could afford them. You feel in yourself, you feel the duty to support that person. So whether I'm the president of the Swan Chamber of Commerce, which costs me money, I want to make a difference to the community. And of course, in that, it's about holding the city of Swan and their executives accountable for our ratepayers' money. So that's as much philanthropy as, for instance, when Peter Lyndon James saw us with his people and he didn't have anywhere to go, and I got the cottages next door. I accommodated them.
Yep.
And we set them up in the labour hire company, so I paid those ex-drug addicts a wage back into, and that affords them to go back to normality, into the normal lifestyle.
But even more than that, like I mean, because I've been around you for so long, I've watched so many people coming in and out of your company. I'm thinking, you know, it's almost like you have this incredible, you have this incredible favour about your life. And like I said earlier on, favour is just not fair, because some people just have this favour on their lives, and I would suggest that a lot of people with favour are quite giving people. It's almost synonymous, you know, just this with just being a giving person,
Yeah.
which is why I talk about philanthropy and stuff like that.
Well, giving is a huge privilege because it makes you feel better.
Right.
It's really still a selfish act when it really comes to the point.
Yeah.
Because you feel better.
Yeah, of course.
Because if you only take, I've never found that takers and want more people that are ever happy, because there's no happiness in that.
I remember sitting with you, Nick, in a room full of people that probably about your age and a bit younger, and they were at a political meeting, and they were always asking what's in it for them. And I remember you just looked at me. She goes, "Bunch of takers in this room, just a bunch of takers."
That's the.
So again, just elaborate. You've been doing what you've been doing for decades. So it's not like one day you became wealthy, so you decided to be liberal.
One of the things, my first wife was in hospital, and she wanted desperate to have a girl because we had three boys.
Yeah.
And so we started the adopt before she got a cancer. But once it lasted 3 years to get qualified to be awarded a child, and she came from South Korea. In that, when I was ready to pick her up, she was in hospital with her second operation.
So you've already got 3 kids.
Yeah.
She's not well. You know she's not well.
She's not well.
But then you're thinking about adopting something.
I didn't tell the health department. They're allowed to know now. But
Isn't that beautiful?
And I flew to Korea, and I picked her up, and I brought her home. And the amazing thing is that cancer actually stopped for 7 years because she was engrossed in her being a baby. So that shows that cancer is created by stress or various other factors. That is an individual thing. There's no, I don't have the solution.
Under remission for the first 7 years.
No, just stopped.
Just stopped.
Stopped. It lasted 20 years before she passed away. But when Mimi went to school, we really laugh about it now. We said if we adopted every 3 years, she might have been still alive. You see, because she lived on young kids, bringing them up.
Yeah.
And of course, I was sponsoring Adoptions International, and the government spent a couple of million a year in stopping people adopting. And we had 1,900 couples in Westroy wanted to adopt, and they frustrated the hell out of them. In fact, in this very room we're sitting at the moment, we had 17, 15, 16, 7-year-old adoptees, adopted children here, and let them speak.
Yeah.
And how they felt about being adopted.
Right, okay.
Not one of them. They came from Vietnam, they're from Eritrea, from Mogadishu, from wherever.
Yeah.
And not one of them regretted being adopted.
Right.
And they were judging that you shouldn't take them out of cultures.
Right, okay.
So finally, the lady who was the chair finally gave up, and a lot of people missed out. So bureaucracy is actually all the do-gooders. What possesses them to be selfish, to take a salary, and to stop people from doing good things?
Right. No, I agree with you.
That blows you away, you know.
What do you think that they should be doing? Talk about adoption. Because I love, obviously, you know, my interest in overseas and orphanages and all that sort of stuff. But just tell me what your thoughts are.
When you talk to the people who missed out,
yeah.
See, there's people who got 2 boys. Like my wife had 3 boys. She was desperate to have a girl.
Right.
And there's a lot of well-to-do people.
Yeah.
And they're quite happy to adopt another 1 or 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah.
Because at the age of 40, 45, you're still young enough to bring another, kid up. Who does the government think they are for stopping that?
Right.
Whilst there's millions of children without parents. Let's face it.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you.
You know, so there's...
So how can we change the government? How can we change them to see reason?
That is the same dilemma as the do-gooders say, by the training, they got their agenda. The education department has their agenda that they want the kids to stay till 17.
Right.
It's
not seeing
year
reason.
12. They can't see reason.
Yeah.
So to make them listen is a hard job.
Right.
And it goes for many, many things. The bureaucracy rules, you know. People have just become compliant to regulations which are not real.
Is it getting worse, or is it always like this? Do you think it's getting?
I think,
do you think there's layers of it now?
I think it's coming to a cost. I think it's getting worse in the bureaucracy, but it's the young people, they don't like it.
Yeah, they've had enough.
They've had enough of absolute overregulation.
Does it remind you of Woodstock?
Absolutely, totally. I mean, Woodstock was totally revolutionary.
AJ here that wished he was born in Woodstock era, you know.
Yeah, Woodstock was an era. We were really, I mean, we are the baby boomers, of course. I was born in '46.
Yeah.
And we are totally rebellious. We are against everything.
Right. Do you feel the cycle's coming back? Do you see the young people?
Yeah, the cycle's coming back.
Yeah.
The young people are very good.
Are you optimistic, Gerry? Do you think?
Absolutely. I believe the young people will hopefully rationalise it, and hopefully that even these new elections, that common sense will prevail, that they pick candidates which got a soul. They're not compliant people.
Right. So what do you think the difference between being compliant and, like you said, about some of your workers, they need to be obedient? It's almost like what's the difference between being compliant and obedient?
Well, that's why I woke up. I said this, God gave humanity, or Moses, the 10 Commandments.
Right.
50% of people or more don't adhere to those because they all get divorced and they all get remarried and
all steal.
And they all steal. So it's probably a much higher percentage. It's probably not. I would say almost safely that 90% do not abide by the
fundamentals,
by the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, right.
So one morning I woke up at 3 o'clock,
right,
and I invented my own. God gave me my commandments, which is the job as the boss.
Right.
So whatever the task is at hand, that's the duty of that person. Whether you're an apprentice, whether you're a cleaner, whether you're a window fixer, whoever you are, you have a duty to do that job to the best of your ability.
So the job as a boss, I like the job as a boss. There've actually 12 principles, 12 expectations, which is a part of the negotiate. Very simple.
Very simple.
Very simple. And so if you want to fulfill those 12 expectations, stay. If you don't, there's a free market.
It's free market.
Right. Now compliance. What's compliance to you?
Well, compliance